Welcome back to Roh'sCorner, the podcast where we dive into the world's most pressing issues with clarity and curiosity. Episode 2, 2025 G7 Summit in Kananaskis, Global Leaders, Urgent Issues, and a Dramatic Exit. I'm your host, Ro, and today we're zooming in on the 51st G7 Summit, which just wrapped up in Kananaskis, Alberta, Canada, from June 15th to 17th, 2025. This year's summit was a whirlwind of high-stakes discussions, global tensions, and a surprising twist with US President Donald Trump's early departure. From economic instability to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, climate challenges, and emerging tech like AI and quantum, the G7 tackled a packed agenda. So, grab your coffee, settle in, and let's unpack what went down in the Canadian Rockies. The Group of Seven. First, let's set the stage. The G7, or Group of Seven, brings together leaders from some of the world's most advanced economies: Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the United Kingdom, and the United States, plus the European Union. This year, Canada took the helm, hosting the summit in the stunning, secluded Kananaskis region, a place known for its rugged mountains and dense forests. It's not just a pretty backdrop. The remote location meant intense security, with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police locking down the area tighter than a drum. Think controlled access zones, highway closures, and even measures to keep black bears away from world leaders. 50th anniversary. But Kananaskis wasn't just about security logistics. It marked the 50th anniversary of the G7's first meeting in 1975, giving this summit a symbolic weight. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, in his first major summit as leader, welcomed a star-studded lineup of global figures. Alongside the G7 core, France's Emmanuel Macron, Germany's Friedrich Merz, Italy's Giorgia Meloni, Japan's Shigeru Ishiba, the UK's Keir Starmer, the US's Donald Trump, and EU leaders Antonio Costa and Ursula von der Leyen. Canada invited a slate of guest leaders. These included Australia's Anthony Albanese, India's Narendra Modi, Mexico's Claudia Sheinbaum, South Africa's Cyril Ramaphosa, South Korea's Lee Jae-myung, and Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelenskyy. International figures like NATO's Mark Rutte, the UN's Antonio Guterres, and the World Bank's Ajay Banga also joined for specific sessions. Absentees. Now, not everyone showed up. Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and Indonesia's President Prabowo Subianto notably declined their invites. Subianto, for instance, opted to visit Russia's Vladimir Putin instead, a move that raised eyebrows and hinted at the geopolitical chess game playing out behind the scenes. But for those who did attend, the agenda was packed with urgent issues: global economic recovery, the Russia-Ukraine war, climate change, AI, quantum technologies, and escalating tensions in the Middle East, particularly between Israel and Iran. President Trump's early exit. Let's start with the big story: President Trump's early exit. According to reports, Trump left Kananaskis a day early, on June 16, 2025, sparking a flurry of speculation. Sources suggest he was frustrated with talks on trade policies and climate commitments, though the White House cited pressing issues as the reason, possibly linked to the intensifying Israel-Iran conflict. Posts on social media even claimed Trump warned of evacuating Tehran, hinting at a potential escalation. His departure echoed his dramatic walkout at the 2018 G7 in Canada, and it left leaders like Carney and Zelenskyy in a tough spot, especially since US support is pivotal for Ukraine. Fragile unity? So, why does this matter? Trump's exit didn't just steal headlines, it underscored the fragile unity among G7 leaders. The summit avoided a joint communiqué this year, likely to dodge public rifts with Trump over his trade war threats, like steeper tariffs looming next month. A senior German official noted that several leaders urged Trump to de-escalate, warning his policies risk global economic stability. But Trump wasn't all disruption. He pushed for stronger trade ties with Canada, calling a deal achievable within days, and floated the idea of China joining the G7, a proposal that stirred debate given Russia's prior ousting. Pivoting to Ukraine. Now, let's pivot to Ukraine, a central focus of the summit. President Zelenskyy was there to rally support as Russia's invasion grinds on. Before the summit, EU leaders called for unwavering G7 unity on Ukraine, and Zelenskyy had bilateral talks with Trump, Carney, and others. The discussion centered on military aid, sanctions on Russia, and energy security to counter Moscow's leverage. Trump's early departure left some questions unanswered, but the G7 reaffirmed its commitment to Kiev, even if the details were light. Israel's appeal for support. Another hot topic was the Israel-Iran conflict, which loomed large. Israeli President Yitzhak Herzog appealed to the G7 for support against Iran, especially after recent strikes on nuclear facilities. The summit's first working session, led by Germany's Merz and attended by Trump before his exit, tackled this issue head-on. Leaders issued a joint statement declaring that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon, a strong signal amid rising tensions. But with Trump's abrupt leave and posts on social media suggesting he might be gearing up for conflict rather than diplomacy, the G7's ability to mediate remains uncertain. Global economic stability. On the economic front, the summit tackled global instability. With trade wars, inflation, and supply chain woes on the table, leaders like Carney emphasized cooperation. Canada pushed quantum technologies and AI as priorities, showcasing its innovation edge. India's Modi, attending his sixth consecutive G7, dove into talks on energy security, AI, and quantum tech, while also holding bilateral meetings to strengthen ties with G7 nations. South Korea's Lee Jae-myung, on his first international trip, and South Africa's Ramaphosa also secured side deals, highlighting the summit's role as a diplomatic speed-dating event. Climate change and the digital transition. Climate change and the digital transition were also front and center. The G7 discussed wildfire economics, and Kananaskis' own wildfire risks, and strategies for a greener future. But with Trump's skepticism on climate policies, progress was rocky. Meanwhile, Canada's focus on quantum tech aimed to position the G7 as leaders in a field that could reshape industries, from cybersecurity to healthcare. These tech talks weren't just nerdy side notes, they're about staying ahead in a world where China and others are racing to dominate. Kananaskis vibes. Now, let's talk about the vibe on the ground. Kananaskis was under lockdown, with Highway 40 closed and RCMP officers patrolling on quads. Calgary, where leaders landed, saw protests targeting everything from trade policies to Middle East conflicts. Mayor Judy Gondek and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith greeted dignitaries, with Smith hosting a reception for non-G7 leaders. Nearby Banff felt the summit's buzz, but not all businesses saw the economic boost they hoped for. Still, the global spotlight on Alberta's Rockies was undeniable, with leaders like the UK's Starmer posting scenic photos on social media, calling Kananaskis not a bad spot. Takeaway. So, what's the takeaway? The 2025 G7 summit was a microcosm of today's world, divided, complex, and teetering on the edge of big changes. Trump's exit stole the show, but the real story is the G7's struggle to stay relevant. With no final communiqué, the summit leaned on side deals and photo ops to signal progress. Leaders like Modi, Zelenskyy, and Carney worked the room, but geopolitical rifts, think Russia, China, and the Middle East, cast long shadows. The G7's cohesion is shaky, and as some social media post put it, the group's internal struggles over Ukraine, trade, and climate raise doubts about its clout. Conclusion. Looking ahead, the G7's challenges won't vanish. Trump's trade policies, the Ukraine war, and Middle East tensions will keep leaders up at night. Canada's push for AI and quantum tech sets a forward-looking tone, but without unity, the G7 risks being more spectacle than solution. As we wrap up, I'm curious, what do you think the G7 needs to do to stay relevant? Drop us a comment. That's it for this episode of Roh's Corner. Thanks for joining us as we unpack the 2025 G7 Summit. Because you enjoyed this deep dive, subscribe and leave us a review. It helps us keep the conversation going. I'm Roh, and we'll be back next week with more stories shaping our world. Stay curious, folks.